We're gonna kind of just go around and introduce ourselves, like kind of where you're at, like geographically, but maybe like where you're at with the whole idea of ministry and church planning, just really brief, and then what brought you to this room, like why are you here? So I'll start. I'm Michael, pastor of the Vineyard Church in Duluth, Minnesota, and help to oversee kind of Vineyard Church multiply Vineyard. And I have been involved in ministry and leadership stuff since the late 70s. And the whole reason I'm engaged in this, that I'm involved in this, because Jesus really transformed like every fiber of my being. And I think it's the healthiest, coolest way to live. And I just want to help lots and lots of other people experience that kind of life, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, my name is Luke Garrity, and I pastor a church in Wisconsin, and I love the idea of planting churches and rural America.
My name is Jonathan. I'm actually from Florida, from Fort Myers, and I'm a VI student, and I actually am here today because of my mom's sacrifice to not be Pentecostal anymore. And so she saw that people were investing into my brother and I, and so she said, let's just stick with the vineyard from now on because I like that. So I'm here today.
My name is Asa, and I'm with the Branch Vineyard in Park City, Utah, and right now it's a small one, so really interested in growing it, and so I'd like to learn to do that.
Cool. Awesome.
My name is Kristen. I'm from South Africa. I immigrated to Houston, Texas 2 years ago, and I'm currently in Duluth, Minnesota doing church life. I'm in this room because Michael invited me.
My name is Josiah. I'm originally from Colorado. Right now I'm involved with the Duluth Vineyard in Minnesota. I am really interested in church planting. I kind of have some visions of doing something like that in the future. I'm still kind of here to refine and see what God has for me. Hopefully narrow down.
I'm Roxy. I'm from Maine. Currently living in Duluth, Minnesota as an HLI student. And I'm here to learn about church planting because I keep hearing people telling me I should do it recently, even though I never really felt like I was supposed to. And so Michael invited us.
I'm Cody. I'm from Colorado, currently in Duluth for HLI, and I'm in the church planting stream, and I just heard about this. So. Very good.
My name is Christian Summers. I'm actually on staff here at this church, Mile High Vineyard, and my role is Southwest Hub Coordinator. So a little branch off of church planning is the multi-site strategy and what we're doing here. And I've always had a heart for church planning coming out of being a missionary in the Philippines and having been on staff at a church before. And just think it's the most effective way to grow the kingdom. And the beauty of this is I don't have to do it on my own. So, and I'm here just to hang out.
Awesome.
I'm Jay Patrick, pastor of this church. I'm here because Michael asked me to be here.
Let's go over here.
I'm Vern, senior pastor of a church down the road in Loveland, Colorado. I'm here because we're interested in planting other churches up and down the Front Range, and just want to learn more about it. Want to get to meet the church planters.
So the Front Range is like this side of
the Rocky Mountains.
There you go. Got it.
I'm Mike Webb. I planted 2 churches. I'm what I suppose to serve as a warning for all you guys what a church planter looks like 35 years on.
Yeah, this is what happens when you've been doing this for 10 years, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
It's actually 28, and
Dave. I'm a church planner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm here because I saw church planning and panel, and thought I'd show up. It's also a nice little retreat for us to get away from kids, and we thought we were coming to warmer climate, but it is still warmer. But
Yeah.
you know, but yeah.
It'll still be this. I'm Rebecca Anderson, married to Dave, so also church planting in Milwaukee. We've been there about a year and 3 months. And we're hoping someone will tell us what to do now that we're there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but no one's really done that for us.
All right, so what would be some helpful things to chat about? What would be some helpful things for you that are like on the front burner that I got lots of stuff I can talk about, but, and so does Mr. Pathak. But I want to make sure that we're talking about stuff that's kind of things that you care about, that are like, that you're thinking about. So this is really aimed at church planting and either, you know, whatever stage of the process you are. So people's questions or thoughts could be different. But so what's some stuff, let's just kind of brainstorm for a minute. What's some stuff that you'd really like to see us cover, to talk about? Get some input on.
It's going to be a really short session.
I'm an introvert. I'm not like Jay. And so uncomfortable silence is my favorite time of the day. So, feel free to let that go on as long as you want.
I'm interested to hear about those who have planted and the initial stages, what life looked like for you, because there's a lot of different methodologies and mindsets. So for maybe the vineyard values, as it were, what does that look like? Whether it was successful or not, what was tried, what worked, what didn't, so on.
That's good. That's a great one. Somebody else?
If we if we have confirmation for being sent off to do a plant or to have a planted church, how do we know if we're supposed to go alone or if we're supposed to go with a group of people or if we're just not supposed to do it unless there are only a group of people? I don't know. Just I guess.
Those are two really good questions.
That's a great question, yeah.
You'll know if you're supposed to go with people, they'll go with you.
That's all I need.
Good, somebody else?
I'm just curious to know, for church planters, if you've been sent out, does the demonic activity and kind of the enemy work more against you, and do you get more kind of barriers? How did that look like for you guys? How did you come against that in the background?
That's very good. Somebody else? Anything else? Is there anything you didn't bring up last time? You want to bring up?
This is all the stuff. I was sitting on one
When the time is right.
I actually have a question.
Yes, sir.
So I guess this is kind of loose, but like what are like the requirements? Not like requirements, but what would you recommend if you're going out to plant a church? Like, you know, do you need to wait till you're like, 40 years old, been in the church for a while, or, just go out and do it? Like, what do you need? And I mean, just like a general idea, like how you guys did it, I guess, or what you've seen work.
That's good. All right, let's dive into some stuff.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start, Cody, with what you just brought up about, and I'm going to tackle it to begin with anyway. I'll let Jay make it cooler and more complicated, but I feel like
That's the two things I add to any conversation.
cooler and more complicated. But so, like, I picture myself as a really simple one-trick pony. Like, I really, and I feel like that God has just clarified this with me over and over and over again. Like Michael really only brings one thing to the table, and it's my relationship with Jesus. And that's the only thing I got. And I remember when I was invited into a relationship with Jesus, one of the passages that Pastor Ted kind of pulled out and showed me in the Psalms was taste and see that the Lord is good. And he just talked to me about my life and all the things I'd tasted and seen, to that point, 17 years old. And said, how did they taste? That's basically what he did for 2 or 3 days as I debated and argued with him about if there really was a God or Christ was. And he was just basically asking me, like, how does all that taste? Are you enjoying it? And how's it working? And then he brought me to John 17:3, which is where Jesus says, now this is eternal life, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you sent. And so, like, he just began to talk with me about what real life was about, and it was about this relationship with Christ. And so really that's the only thing I still bring to the table. It's good. Like, I have a relationship with Jesus, and it tastes stinking good. Like, it's really good. It meets every single need of my life. Whenever I go to other stuff, it doesn't meet my needs. And so, like, I just bring that up when I'm working with leaders or church planners. I just dial it back to that because that's my thing. I dial it back to that over and over and over again. Like, that's just got to be such a real thing that has radically changed and transformed your life. That's so that you're actually discovering what healthy human living looks like. I was for a number of years I made my living as an artist. I was an art student at American Academy in Chicago, and I love this. So I discovered a guy along the way named Hans Werkmacher, H.R. Werkmacher from Amsterdam. And he's got this really famous quote that I like a lot. And it goes like this: Christ did not die to make us a Christian. He died to make us human. And like, so that's the thing I bring to the table. It's like, Jesus helps us actually become human. It actually helps us become whole and healthy. And like, that's it. That's like the number one requirement. Now that should be true like for every single follower of Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. Well, for leaders, sometimes we get so caught up in all the other kinds of things. And we have all these different reasons why we lead, all these different things that we do. And all those other kinds of things produce unhealth. If I'm leading because I want to feel better about myself, if I'm leading because I think I'm the only one who knows what's wrong with the world and I want to fix this thing or that thing, it produces varying levels of unhealth. It may help answer a problem here or there, but there's so much unhealthy stuff, and there's this connectedness to Jesus, the real life that flows out of him. It's actually like awesome. So that's where I would start it off. Now, make it cooler and more complicated, Jay.
That's what I'm here to do. I'm a 10-trick pony. No. That was good. Yeah, I think what's hard about what you're asking, there's so many layers or levels to think about this. And, so there's a bunch of things to assume that you really can't assume, is kind of what Michael's saying, which is the thing to say. So if you think about someone that really loves and follows Jesus and someone exhibits some kind of leadership, which is servant and is generated from who they really are, not just the gifts that they possess. And then as you start to think about ministry, you might be a staff pastor, might be a staff leader. That's another kind of gift mix. And then church planting is a whole separate thing, right? So just, in other words, just because you're great in ministry doesn't necessarily mean you should be a church planter. There's lots of people that can pastor dozens or even thousands of people in the context of church. But if they plant a church, they don't have those gifts. So That's a there's a lot to think about there, but so with all those things assumed, let's talk about what makes a church planter specifically unique. And for me, just having watched a lot, I think we have our 12 characteristics we talk about with church planting. Those are really helpful. That's worth referring to that document the Vineyard puts out, because I think those things are all really helpful. A number of those things are just helpful for leadership in general. So the three that I would pick, which I always pick when I think about church planting, is church planters demonstrate fruitful evangelism, like they actually see people discover life with Jesus. Not just through the rhythms of the church, i.e. they pray with someone up front when they came up because so-and-so preached the sermon, but that they actually have seen that they like are around people who don't know Jesus, they enjoy that, and there's some fruit there, and they're like watching that happen. That's like a big deal. Now, I don't also mean that they have the desire for that. They like that. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Period. So whenever I talk to a potential church planter, the first question I always ask is, tell me about the last 5 people you've seen come to Christ. And if they go, I don't have any of those, my first thought is, well, what are you going to do when you plant a church? That's like all you do. You don't have like another thing to do. There's nobody there. Like nobody is like waiting to hear you preach. It's not like there's a room of people sitting going, if only someone would walk on the stage, we could have a church. No, they're doing their life. They like their life the way it is or whatever, so you have to know how to do that. So if they don't have that, then I want to ask within that question, tell me about some unchurched people you spend time with that you care about. Are you praying for them? How are you engaging them? If they don't answer that, that's a big problem. If they say, no, I have these friends, I'll say, well, how many of those people know that you want them to know Jesus? Now that's an interesting moment too, because often they go, none. I just hang out with them. So I go, you're being like extra stealthy and sneaky. It's never occurred to you to like tell them, I love and follow Jesus. I would love it if you knew Jesus. Even if you're just gracious to where they're like, leave me alone. Okay, I won't talk about that. But then they know, right? And so often we've been engaging people, but we've never actually just asked, is this interesting to you? This is really important to me. The way you really love people is you share what you love with people. So if they can answer some kind of semblance of momentum there, I think, they might be a church planter. And then the next question is, do you take those people who met Jesus and do you have the ability to lead a small group of people like that? Tell me about the small group you're leading right now. And say, I don't do one of those. Well, what do you think you're going to do when you plant a church? Like, first of all, you have to like see people meet Jesus, and you have to actually lead them somehow. And you don't just walk into rooms and clip on a mic and preach. Like, that's not how it works. So if you can't lead small groups, you're probably not going to plant a church. And then the third question is, tell me about the leaders that you've raised up and the small groups you've multiplied. So if they can say, yeah, I've seen 3 or 4 small groups multiply with leadership, and they all still exist. Not I multiply them and watch them die, but they actually are ongoing. And I would like a list of those people's names. I'd like to call them and say, hey, so Luke says that you helped him grow as a leader. If they go, Luke who? I think I met him once or whatever, that's a bad sign. Or give me the list of people that you've seen come to Christ. I'd love to be able to call them. Oh, I know people Christ was on spring break for a mission trip. Oh, well, that's a different thing than living life with people and watching people come to Christ. So I think if you can do those 3 things, just those 3, seeing people know Jesus, building in small groups, and multiply small groups, you can probably have a church somewhere around 150 people. Right in that window. Because you could just keep doing that. Because those people will all be taken care of by other people. So it's a sense. If you can't do those 3 things, i.e. you don't have that proven, you're probably not going to grow a church when you plant one. Every church planner I interact with isn't doing those three things. And that's why they aren't growing a church. That's it. I mean, it's simple math, right? I mean, it's not that complicated. Notice all the things I didn't say. Preach well. Actually, you don't even have to. You're just multiplying leaders and groups. And if you get to be, again, around that 100 to 150, you have to be able to preach somewhat so you're not like scaring people away or repelling them. But if, I mean, gosh, I don't know if you've been to a lot of churches and listened to preaching, it's really bad, you know? There's just like a lot of bad preaching in the world. So apparently you don't have to be able to preach well to have a church. I mean, like, now if you want to grow a church, if you want to see it develop over time, you want to form healthy culture over time, you have to learn those things. But I have faith that you can learn those aptitudes. I think those are learnable skills that God can give you grace for. What's sad is people have usually wired it backward. They like leading, they like preaching, they like doing classes, they enjoy church, and that's why they want to play. But that doesn't work. Because very few people in the city you're going to are thinking, I wonder if there's a place I could go sing songs for 45 minutes and listen to someone talk for 30 minutes. There's nowhere in Denver. I don't think those people are walking around unless they're already Christians. So, and I don't want to plant churches just to gather Christians. So if you can build those aptitudes, and those things I just mentioned, by the way, you can try on. You can see if you have those things. You don't have to wonder, like, I wonder what will happen. Well, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So that would be my attempt to make it more complicated and cool. That was good. Did I do good?
Yeah, that was
There were 3 tricks in there.
Yeah.
What's strange is the aptitudes I'm mentioning right now often aren't the types of people who are thinking about doing ministry. See, because they've seen church, they've seen ministry,
That's right.
and they're not thinking what they do is that. So they're confused, you know, they haven't been given the right framework to imagine doing this. Does that make sense? A lot of the people that I'm talking about end up starting businesses. They end up in some kind of sales game. They might even work for a parachurch usually, or some kind of nonprofit, doing social fundraising or whatever. They have these gifts, but they don't feel like church gifts. Because when you operate like this and a church is growing, you start to create problems. You're like a troublemaker. That's what I look for in churches that have any size. I look for the people that exhibit tons of leadership and are agitating the systems. That's probably a church planner. So it's difficult to spot this type of person at a point sometimes because they're not showing up in the common radars.
So let's ask some questions about kind of those 3 things, or what Jay didn't bring up, or like we're talking about kind of requirements or necessities, or kind of key core behaviors of a church planter. Like, what do you guys think about that? Like about those kind of 3 things? What's some thoughts?
Does anyone qualify? Plant church?
I want to do it again.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, what you said about, are you already exhibiting those things now? Years before Dave and I actually church planted, we kind of recognized that we were doing most of our ministry within the church. If we really kind of were leaning into church planting, we needed to be like reshifting that to hanging out mostly with people outside the church. So I'm not saying you necessarily need to do this, but we gave up a lot of our ministries in the church. We stopped doing a small group. We just started hanging out with our neighbors and having parties and game nights, and we lived in Ohio at the time, Buckeye parties and stuff, and just threw ourselves into building community outside the church. And that, we learned a ton from that. That I think was huge preparation. Just doing life with people. And it was really cool, just the community that really formed just right geographically in our neighborhood through that process. And that community is continuing even in our absence. Like, you know, they're still doing book club together and taking each other meals. And so it's just cool. And so I'm not sure that we could have built a church out of that neighborhood group. We were already part of a church at the time. We invited a lot of those people to church and a lot of those people into, you know, our life with Jesus and prayed for people and shared Christ with them.
Someone came to church.
Yeah, someone came to church. But definitely for sure, it just really taught us what ministry looked like, which was very non-structured, systematic, very gray, and not measurable, and you have to be okay with that. And no one else will recognize it as ministry. So you have to be okay with that too.
I remember people telling me, oh yeah, you should be looking at church planting and things like that. I don't know. Yeah, you probably, I know you guys, but it was at a brief conference, and I was like, I don't know if I should do this. And you asked me that same question, like, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? What are you doing right now? And at the time we were throwing our parties, we just started that. And he's like, well, you're kind of doing church planting here. Like, then that makes sense that you could do it somewhere else. And that was actually really, for me at that time, was really profound to just think about that. Like, what am I actually doing now? That was really helpful.
Well, think how weird that is, though. So you were doing it, but it proves the thing I was trying to say, which is you weren't thinking of yourself as a church planner.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Meanwhile, there's all these people thinking of themselves as church planners who aren't doing any of those things.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's really weird.
Well, and when we were just talking too, like, a lot of the training that you get through your church is really how to preach, how to run a service, how to
Do church stuff.
church stuff.
Which isn't bad.
No,
Those years
eventually,
kick in.
yeah,
That's
eventually
right.
you need to know that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the real training to do that kind of thing, I don't think you can learn it in a classroom setting. You just have to start doing it. And you just start fumbling your way through it. God shows up.
I think the other thing too, for me, like going through was like, I was on staff at Vineyard Columbus for 5 years, and when we started to think about church planting, I picked up a part-time job outside the church, because you do get caught in this whole bubble of all I hang out is with church people and programs and everything else, and you forget what it's like to work and sit with someone that's completely opposite in every sense of the word of you, and to have that exposure and to sit in those relationships and try to build relationships with, it's really helpful to do that, to get outside of the bubble.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Other thoughts? Other comments?
Yeah, I feel like my mindset normally is primarily like in the church. When I'm thinking about church planning, it's like thinking about this now, my mind almost feels like trapped in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm thinking about how I'm going to preach, how I'm going to do worship, how I'm going to, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I just wrote down like get outside the church. So, I mean,
So the thing that I find, unhelpful is the way that we often think about church as a Sunday service.
Mm-hmm.
Or we think about church as a meeting, and the church is not a Sunday service or a meeting. That's just a thing that church community does, maybe. But that's not church. Church is people following Jesus, and their lives are being transformed in a transforming community. So for me, a big part of it is always constantly thinking about, when I say the word church, what am I talking about? Here's what I'm not talking about. And so I've often said, and pastors don't like it when I say this, but I'm just going to go on record and say it, is I think that the Sunday service is a necessary evil. Because it's necessary because it's part of what the community does. This is a big deal of coming together, worshiping together, looking at the scriptures together, praying for one another, talking about what relationship with Christ is all about, kind of in that public setting. I think it's necessary. But the evil part is probably stated way too strong. But it's then we limit. That's what church is. That's all it is. And it's not. So I would always play games with people when they would ask me when I was when we first started, I was going out and trying to talk to 100 people a week. I said, set this unrealistic goal for an introvert to go out and try to meet 100 new people every week, and talk about it. I out of 2 years, there were 2 weeks where I hit my goal. So I was 102 weeks as a failure. That was good. And they would often ask, like, where's your church? And I'd go, they're everywhere. They're like, no, you don't understand what I'm asking. Yeah, I do understand what you're asking. Where's your church? They're like all over the place. Like I can hardly go into a restaurant. They're not there. You know, and it's good. So it's just kind of trying to blow that thing open. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I know that I've learned the hard way where over the past couple of years, I've realized that you can't build relationships on a Sunday morning and just rely on that.
Right.
And that just grew and grew and grew on my heart about, small groups is that much more important for that kind of stuff, and that Sunday mornings do serve their purpose, but when it comes to delving into deeper relationships and doing what you're supposed to be doing and going and reaching out after people that are lost or broken in that kind of way, I feel like they would more likely choose to come to a small group than on a Sunday morning anyway. And I think that's totally right. And I've learned that the hard way.
It's good.
Does what we talked about there excite you, or does it intimidate you? Does it inspire you? What does that do to you?
It sounds like the most natural way that it should be done.
As I've journeyed through this, and I came from a different denominational context where they had a paradigm for church planning that equated to sending out 10,000 leaflets, knocking on 1,000 doors, and you should somehow try to gather 100 people on Sunday. And something about that seemed really screwed up. It wasn't real. And their level of success is if you launch, which equated to a Sunday service. And so having stuff recalibrate, I've heard this stuff for a couple of years, and early on it was like that whole thing, like it just goes, oh, it like you have to unpack and recalibrate and detoxify from a mindset that's been perpetuated in American church culture. So yeah, this stuff I can resonate with those that are sitting going, oh, this is kind of painful to rethink this stuff. I remember spending the last few years doing this with Jay, but it's really refreshing too because you start to live it and do it, and it becomes alive, and it becomes more natural. You become more fluent in being effective to do it. You know, the point you guys touched on, somebody was asking us, so we look at doing a Southwest hub. And they said, when's the launch? I said, it already has.
We've done it. Yeah.
It's here, it's now, it's happening. We have small groups meeting, we're doing events, we're getting involved. Well, where do you meet? We're not worried about that yet. That's not
Everywhere.
That's it. Yeah, everywhere. So,
we own the city.
I like that. I'm gonna use that.
They're thinking of a program.
Yeah,
They're like, what? When's your start date? Where are you meeting? It's not.
Yeah.
They're not. They're inside the box still.
Yeah. There's one guy, a great guy. He was pressing on what's our target market, and I said that's a really good question. I think you're thinking of it the right way if we're a corporation. Like we came in with like $4 million, we had a TV budget, and we had all this stuff. You have to answer those questions. We have no budget, zero. And so we're working more like an MLM, like a multi-level marketing scheme. Our target is everyone you know, and then you have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So it's like when someone tries to sell you Amway or one of these things, they're trained to just mine all their networks. Well, that's what you see in the New Testament. You see Andrew saying, come and see to his friends, his family. You see the oikos idea of Luke, these networks of people, families, and business frameworks that kind of fall into the kingdom. And so this enables us to sort of just be really fluid to what's happening and what we have favor to do. And it also enables us to realize that maybe we can't do it. You know, I can remember being in a room just like this in the Columbus Vineyard. I would have been, probably 19. And they're talking about these kinds of things, about unchurched people who come to Jesus. Oh, I'm listening, and I just felt like I was going to jump out of my skin. I was just getting more and more excited. I was studying because I want to be a lawyer. So I thought, I'm not going to do this stuff. I don't like this enough, church stuff. I mean, I didn't dislike it. I just didn't like it. I didn't want to build a career out of it. I want to do something else. But I love Jesus. I want people to know Jesus. And I want to build groups. And I remember going through the characteristics, and each one I'm just going, I want to do that. I'm already doing it. That's what's in my heart to do. At the end, just like that, a guy teaching, this guy Rick Evans, said, who's excited about this? And I looked around, and there were like 2 people out of like 50. And I went, oh. I just assumed we're all experiencing this. Like, this is obviously what we're supposed to give our lives to. You know, I just felt the momentum of the thing. It was like crescendoing in my own mind. It was like, and then, yeah, you know, we're gonna go. And it's like me and someone else. And I went, oh. And that was the first time it hit me, like, this is really weird and rare and strange and very costly and very specific. And so even as we think about church planting the Vineyard, we have these dreams to plant tons and tons of churches. But, you know, I think we realize that everyone has a job to play. It just isn't all in this chair, right? You know, teams form around great planters who feel called, and then a team comes and says, we're just going to help. You know? That's so important, so powerful. We need churches, Vineyard churches, to stay healthy, to continue to coach and model, you know, send. We need so many parts of this thing. So that's why I asked. I just thought, I wonder if anybody's excited. Does that excite you? If it doesn't, that's worth paying attention to. You know, like if something inside you just goes, no, that sounds terrible. I would much rather like just get a job at a church. Well, then you should think about that. I mean, for real, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff you can do.
Boy, there really is. But if something in you goes, yes, I want to do that, I just think it's worth noting that's weird. There aren't many people that love Jesus and want to do ministry that also want to do that. It's a pretty small sliver, in my opinion. And then it's even a smaller sliver that can demonstrate that they can't do it. That actually works.
Thoughts?
Grit. What's that?
Grit.
I mean, Bob Logan had talked about that. This, what was it, from TED Talks?
Yeah, there's a guy that does a TED Talk.
This would be something to watch. And it's this lady talking about, I think she was a school teacher who just observed how there were some students that just were able to overcome the worst obstacles, and she narrowed it down to grit, which, you know, okay, what's that? But it's, you know, a combination like perseverance, and I heard you talk about this at the MLM meeting, just about when you planted a church in Denver, you were going to make it happen. You didn't care if you had support financially. Yeah, we're going to do this. Yeah. And I went home and I thought, wow, that's like so, you know, inspiring, you know, to like go back to our communities, you know, to like, hey, I love this community so much that I'm gonna, you know, die for it. I'm willing to give up everything.
So I've thought that's like the core call of a church planter. I'm going to go give up my life so that there could be a healthy community of Jesus followers in this place. Like it's kind of like the core call. Maybe it's overstated, but apparently I like to do that. So, but I think that's kind of like the core thing, you know. And even like let's say that you're good at those 3 things and you grow it. Like the group that you're growing, it grows to 150. Well, you have to become a different kind of leader than to take it from there to 500 people. You have to be willing to change who you are as a leader to take that next step. And it's another way that you die to yourself. Because I've talked to lots of pastors who have, and even planters that have taken it like to a certain step, and they say, so what do we need to do now to take it to the next step? I go, well, here's some things you need to do. You need to change the way you're doing stuff. And here's some things you need to adjust in that. And like half of them go, no, I ain't gonna do that.
I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that. You're like, oh, okay, so let me understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, I just want to keep the Holy Spirit from like actually bringing more people to faith in Christ. I mean, let me just understand what you're actually saying here. So,
Or they try and you can.
yeah.
We all have different capacities, and it's, so sometimes it's plant again, let's send again. I mean, there's always ways to grow. Multiplication or growth, or both growth. It's hard though.
Yeah, so I think it's this core call to lay down our lives. I like that.
Developing a second trick, be careful.
That's still the first trick.
It's part 2 of the first trick. It's one trick with many parts.
It's 1.2. Cool. What about then? Let's talk about like if we feel like we're supposed to do that. Like, how do you think about team? How do you think about like going together, going alone? What are some ways to think about that? You want to talk about that, Dan?
Sure. So when we were getting ready to actually do this thing, like I said, I was on staff at Vineyard Columbus, and I immediately went into this mindset of I have to recruit like all the best people around, because they'll all want to come with us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and
Who wouldn't?
they're right, right, and so I literally was like a hawk, just like circling around staff, like, oh, that guy right there, and I'm like, I gotta go to lunch with them and try to recruit, and for me it was just an epic failure. Like, no one wanted to come with us. People were like, oh yeah, I totally want to go with you. Where are you going? Milwaukee. No, I'd go anywhere else, but I'm not gonna go to Milwaukee. But
Just said Miami.
I know.
yeah, right. Something with an
Never
M.
mind Milwaukee.
We're changing it. Last time.
Right. But
Now that you've quit your job.
yes, that's right. But what I finally realized, our story was like, and this is for me, our story was so unique. God spoke in a crazy way through literally bar names and license plates that led us to Milwaukee, and it's a crazy story. And what I felt as going through that process, that like God was saying, you know what, I've got a story for other people, and I'll figure that out. You don't need to go and recruit. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. Don't make that the thing. And so I started to loosen my grips on the idea of forming a team. I'm not saying that's for everyone. There's some people that I think the most common thing is to try to have a team to go. I think most statistics say that your team that goes with you doesn't stay with you. I think most church planters will tell you that over the few years after they've planted. We went by ourselves, and what we found is God does sort of bring people too, like when you get there. And there's relationships that form that you get there. When you get there, there's people that are potential core members that we're engaging with. There's new relationships that people don't even know Jesus yet, but as you start to have a relationship with them, you're like, oh my gosh, like this person totally has the gift of evangelism and doesn't even know it, and would be a great person on a team. So that's just kind of our story when it came to team.
I think a lot of it too depends, like, I was saying earlier, we're in our early 40s, and a lot of our people that we were doing ministry with and a relationship with were at a stage in their life where they had school-age kids, a mortgage, 6-figure income. It's a lot harder for people to uproot and make a huge life change like that unless they really feel called to. Where sometimes when you go when you're younger and people don't have children, they don't have a house they've invested in for 10 years. So I think sometimes depending on the age you're in and the demographic of, people that you're doing ministry with, you may have more people that are kind of willing to take some risks like that. So I don't know that I think there's probably pros and cons to going to team. We knew we had to go, and it was really an act of obedience for us. We knew God had called us to go. We knew it was time to go. So we were going to go with or without a team. And I think it's actually worked out okay for us because God really sent a lot of people to us pretty early on when we got there. And I think because we've been married for a long time and been through some stuff in our lives, kind of the challenges that we were facing early on, we kind of had some roots to help us with that. I think sometimes when you're younger, it may benefit to have a little more support system with you. I think we were able to withstand that lack of support system in a way we may not have earlier on in our lives. So it was just the right timing for us. It was just the time God had for us. So He's really taking care of us. So so we're coming from a place where we didn't have a team and it worked out.
One thing I would caution if you're, like you're saying, if you're getting excited about this and some of the stuff we're saying is stirring. When it comes to team, I would caution you against saying, hey, these are my core group of friends.
Yeah.
And let's go plant a church together. Because what happens is you wind up, just from talking to other church planters, you wind up actually becoming this little closed group. And you love on each other really, really well, but that's not church planting. You're supposed to go after those that don't know Jesus, build a relationship with people who are out there that desperately need to know that Jesus loves them. And if you're so focused on your group and loving your group, you'll never get there. You'll never get there.
That being said, we would love a handful of people that were really invested in what we're doing. That could do some of the grunt work, because we don't have a lot of people like that who are younger and have kind of a little more of the time, the energy. That we would love some of those people to be part of what we're doing. So we can see the benefit of having some people like that, part of what we're doing. So, yeah.
So my favorite recruiting strategy is twofold. The first is I try to cast as much vision as I possibly can for what God wants to do in that area and how I picture that working out, what we're going to be spending our time doing. So I try to cast as much vision. It's kind of like fishing. I'm throwing as many lines out in the water as I can with some really good, tasty bait, and then seeing who bites on that. And then the second strategy is that anybody who bites on it, I try to talk them out of it. And I just tell them, I refuse to recruit you, because if I recruit you, when it gets hard, I'm going to have to be the one to make it cool for you. Like you're going to come back to me and go, you recruited me, you told me all this stuff, and so I tell them, I want you to know that God's called you to do it, because when it gets tough, He's going to be the one that will meet all your needs. So I cast the biggest, best vision I can of what God's inviting me into, and then I try to talk them out of it. And then if they still go, it's sweet. And so I had a good friend of mine. I was actually a drummer on his worship team when we moved to Duluth. He came and visited us about a year later, and he goes, so I'm thinking of either moving to Duluth and helping you guys, or going down here and taking a job as a worship leader. What should I do? And I said, I think you should go take a job as a worship leader, because I'll never pay you. And and I already know everything I know, so you should go learn from that other guy. And so they went back, quit his job, sold his house and moved to Duluth. And I was like, what happened? You didn't take my advice? And he said, no, your advice talked me into it. I'm like, I want to follow that guy. I'm like, sweet. And they were there for 15, 16 years, raised their kids, did amazing work, maybe even 17 years, and they just moved away, because all their kids had now grown up and moved away. They helped so many marriages, they poured into so many people, never on staff, but key core leaders. He started a worship team of 3rd and 4th graders. And all those folks are still leading worship today. They're all getting married and having kids now, those that were in 3rd and 4th grade. It was one of the best leaders we could have had. but like I tried to talk him out of coming, but he couldn't like turn down the vision. So I think that's a great strategy. Do you have a better one? Cooler, more complicated one?
I do. Teams are hard, and when you look at the statistics, for churches to make it quickly, you need teams. So the statistics are really clear on church planting. If you don't have a team, your ramp is a lot longer to get going. If you do have a team, your ramp to get a church going is shorter, but your chaos factor is higher. Teams, like I've not met one team that's kept more than like 30% of their people 4 years, 5 years later. Not one. So all you have to do is do the math on that, like what that means. Like how does that, are they not there? And it's usually an assorted series of emotional things. And it usually depends on what kind of church you come from. So if you came from a big church, you're trying to plant a church, you have all kinds of weird dynamics because of expectations. If you're a good recruiter, builder, visionary, even if you tell them they're not coming to be your friend, the way you said, they still are. So when you're not their friend, or you invest in their friend at the cost of the church, either way, everybody loses. So you guys are best friends hanging out, but there's no church. It's like, that creates a lot of pain. Or you say, hey, we're not best friends. We're going to build this church. We're going to go out and engage people. Then they feel let down. You can create all the expectations however you want, and they'll still do that. That's just the way it goes. So Steve Sjogren, back in the day, talked about church planting as though your teams are your scaffolding a lot of times. They're the people that help you build for a time. And scaffolding building, people usually get tired when there's actually a building. They don't want to be there anymore. They don't enjoy it. They're wired to do kind of a lot of different things and to be connected to the core. And as you grow a church, they're no longer either. They're not able to do a lot of things. They have to specialize, and they're not connected to the core. And that creates usually relational and emotional dysfunction. They're hurt. You start to hurt people. So the best thing you can do as a pastor is just try to figure out how to make it easy for people to leave. Just say, gosh, you've been great. Time to go. Michael's story of the guy there 16 years is pretty rare. I mean, over time, you might have a handful that make it the whole way. The majority won't. And that's fine. That's just the way it is. Different people are wired for different stages. So, and frankly, I think we really underestimate the power of temperament. Being people that are just flexible human beings tend to do better, even if they don't have a lot of gifts to bring. I remember when we were recruiting, everything at that time was about recruit a specific worship person, recruiting this person, that person. And so we recruited all those kinds of people, and then they all freaked out when we got here. Meanwhile, I had some other people that really didn't have a real job. Like, they were just nice people. And they would just sort of like walk around and like set up chairs and like make coffee and pray for people and invite people and follow up with people. And that's all they did. And they weren't even like that interesting. Those were the people that were so helpful down the line. And those, frankly, those are the people who are still around. Those are the people that just kind of did the work. They weren't super flashy. I didn't have a clear job for them. Because even if I told the other people they didn't have a clear job, they had an expectation. And it doesn't matter how much you tell them that there isn't one, they still do. I don't know if you've noticed that you have expectations all the time. You just don't know you do until they're not met. All of a sudden it occurs to you, I'm disappointed. I don't remember ever deciding what I was thinking I was getting. This is called being married. Someone just occurs to you. Hey, it's your marriage. I'll just say, well, hey, she'll be the first one to admit that's her experience of me. So, And so that just works in every relationship, and how much more when it's a church where people make a huge sacrifice, it costs a lot of money. There's all this weighted spiritual stuff. There's all this weighted relational stuff. Everything's weighted, and then there's warfare. So you connect all those dots, something's going to happen. So it's always, I always try to tell people, create really good off-ramps for your team. Make it easy for them to be going. And because, you know, it's easy to get distracted with teams. They end up not being as helpful as you thought they were going to be.
And I think a key part for scaffolding is you don't put nearly as much time constructing the scaffolding as you do the building. And so I've watched people put all their time into the scaffolding, and they never get to build a church. Because they're just doing nothing but caring for that group of people. Scaffolding is, you know, this sounds kind of harsh, but scaffolding is there to be used. And we never want to just use people and abuse them and throw them away. Never do we want to do that. But just realize that some of those folks are not the church that you're trying to build. But they're going to help do it. And you're going to help along the way. So we love them and let them serve and allow them that. Then, you know, so.
And there's people that realize, it sounds like your friend you mentioned. It's a great example. He's like, I know there's no job. I want to go. I'll serve marriages and do what I can do. That's so rare. So rare. So that's teams. Did I answer that?
We're just making it more and more appealing.
Well, and I think it's good
If
to
we
have.
come back around it.
If you can have teams, you should have them, but realize what it is.
Kind of a follow-up question on that. Would you consider a family who's in this together a team together, or is the outside as beneficial if you have a family?
I know of a couple families, like the Nelsons, when they moved from Illinois. You guys met them when they moved up to Tomahawk, Wisconsin. It was basically mom, dad, 3, 4 kids, whatever they were. That was their team. And the kids were totally bought into it. Like, they did this thing together. And now, you know, I think they're still, like, for the most part, the whole family's still involved in the church, their leadership, their staff. It's like, it's rare, but absolutely.
I know we have young kids. We have 12, 9, and 3-year-old. And our 12-year-old has introduced us to more people in our neighborhood just by playing with other kids. And next thing you know, we're having the whole family over for dinner. So they very much are part of our team. I would say, you know, some of the most intimate relationships we've built over the last year are through our son and his playmates and their families.
Cool.
Yeah, my kids introduced me to lots of people. It was sometimes really good, and sometimes
Not so good.
not so good.
There's a few I don't want to see come back. You know, it's like, all right.
There's a few I had to apologize.
Church planner, you can't be picky.
I know.
There you go.
Like, okay.
There were some that I met through apology. I like that. All right, another question was about spiritual warfare. Okay, that was basically a question, right? Spiritual warfare around church planning. Boom. What are some thoughts? Thoughts about
The
that?
answer is yes. Next question.
I don't think you do anything in the kingdom without pushback from the enemy. You don't do anything. And over time, I don't know what it is, but over time, you know, whether you're just like used to the battle, over time, it feels to me like it does get easier, because you're used to doing spiritual warfare on behalf of yourself and your family. I mean, it's a normal part of your life, and it doesn't like catch you off guard anymore. I've fallen on the end of the spectrum where I am really late to call something warfare. You know, I fall on the end of the spectrum where You know, just because my car ran out of gas because I didn't fill it up, does not mean the enemy's like stalking me. It's like I just forgot to fill up my car, but
That doesn't mean he isn't.
So, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, there's times where it's intense, and all of a sudden I'll realize everybody I know is experiencing just catastrophic stuff in their life. So maybe this is warfare right now at this moment. Let's huddle, you know, the wagons. Let's really pray. Let's press into this and do battle on behalf of one another. And I've had very distinct times of very intense spiritual attack. And one of the things that I've learned recently is praying in tongues really loud helps. It's the most bizarre thing. I'm going to pray in a language really loud that I don't get. And at the end of an hour, like, it is totally different. Like, I cannot explain that. That bugs me that I can't explain it. But that totally works. So.
I have found too, like, when I felt just like, especially this last year, like just really kind of oppressed and lots of levels, I almost have trouble praying for myself. I'll just text or email 3 or 4 of my friends I know pray. To say, I really need to, go to bat for me right now. And I just can't tell you how many times within a couple hours, I just feel everything lifted. Like, it's a profound mystery to me how 3 or 4 people praying on my behalf. But it's almost like you can tell there's those times where you're just feeling the pressure in a unique way. So really pressing into those longer term support systems, people you know will pray, has really helped.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced some pretty dark days in the last year. And
Well, the sun sets early in Milwaukee.
yeah, it does. Very dark. But the same thing. It's we talked about teams earlier, but to have a prayer team, to have people that you can be really authentic with and say, listen, I'm going through something here, I'm feeling spiritual attack here, and knowing that those people pray right away. It's really, I mean, I just had an experience where the very first stranger I met in Milwaukee at a park accepted Christ. And I should be on this massive high. This is our first person who said, this is it. I want Jesus in charge of who I am, And I should be on this massive high. But I remember immediately feeling worthless and I should quit. I shouldn't even do this. This is stupid. And it was just Satan just chirping in my ear. And to be able to truly talk that out and have people pray for you over that is huge, because it happens. It happens.
Yeah, I don't know that if your question is coming from a source of fear or not, because I used to feel that way often, going into ministry, this fear that my kids would come under attack, or I was setting myself up very vulnerable or whatever. But I truly do think that you're ultimately your safest place to be is in the center where God wants you and has called you. And I think really we're all just vulnerable as human beings. But I think walking in hand with the Lord is the safest place you could possibly be. You know what I'm saying when I say safest? For your soul's sake. And I think I have just found that I'm pretty aware of the enemy's tactic, my vulnerable places. You know what I mean? You start to build a sense I'm just really feeling a resistance that's of a spiritual nature. I sort of be able to discern versus just life circumstances. Feel like things are chaotic because I'm ADD right now. My house is a mess. That's why things are chaotic. Versus we're pressing into this and there's stuff happening. And so of course the enemy's gonna bring some self-condemnation or bring some that's what he tends to do, bring some fear over me because cool things are happening. And to me it's an invitation to just press in prayer. God must be really moving in here because I'm feeling some. The year leading to church planning, I literally described it as I felt like I was walking through Jell-O. Every step just was painful and hard. And yet I knew it was a spiritual thing happening that just gave me more confirmation that this was of the Lord. Versus a sense like nothing's happening, maybe this really isn't of God. It was like super hard, and yet I could tell it was because it was meant to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt that experience since we've been on the ground. Like, I can tell when it's my own just sin nature and just life circumstances, just life's hard versus like something's happening in the spiritual realm here. This is time to really press in prayer, and I felt God really good at that for me when I've like just been really dependent on Him. So I feel like you're still setting yourself and your kids up for the best possible existence to like go for it in full dependency. I don't know if that makes sense or that's helpful, because I still struggle with that sometimes with 3 kids. I still struggle a little bit, but I feel like I've got like the creator of the universe on my side. You know what I mean? Like what better person to be, going to bat for you. So, yeah.
I think that should be the title of the book, Walking Through Jello.
That's good.
That would be the title of my
That's the
book.
first time I heard you say that.
I like that, that's good. So many cool pictures. Yeah. We could make a music video.
That would be fun, actually.
Breathe. Snorkel, then snorkel. I also think of the way that, in terms of spiritual warfare, the enemy will capitalize on my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that he will use my weaknesses against me and against the people around me. And he would love to use my weaknesses to destroy my team, to destroy my family. And so you have to be relentless about allowing God to come and heal. And I just think that you have to be relentless at saying, I am broken, and here's a place where I need help. So I just noticed this in my own life recently. Again, I noticed like over the past year trying to lead Multiply Vineyard, I noticed I was being short with all of my team members. Not the folks in our church, but the team members I'm working with around the country. And I just noticed I was being short with everybody, and I was constantly always frustrated because we weren't like doing some of the things I wanted us to get done. We're trying to change like this really big shit. We're trying to change direction, and it wasn't happening yesterday. And so I was finding myself agitated a lot. And I just realized along the way, a good friend of mine pulled me aside and just said, this isn't you. This isn't the you that I met, that I wanted to work with. And I said, wow, you know what? I think you're right. And we had like this long, 2-hour dinner. I was crying. And I went back to the hotel room that night, and I just said, God, what is this about? And I felt like he said, to me, so this is like me pressing into my healing, right? And I feel like he says, your identity is coming from this instead of from me. Like a little tiny tweak, and your identity's in the wrong place. And so let's just get your identity from me. And again, all of a sudden I have, next day, so much grace. Like it just fills my life for the people I'm working with. And so like those weaknesses, like he will use those to like just wipe us out. And so we have to be relentless about going to Jesus and being healed, being a one-trick pony. We just got to be relentless about that. So, and that's part of warfare. That's good. Christian, what was your question? Your question was
just a really practical aspect. What did it look like when you moved to Denver? When you moved to Milwaukee? There's a paradigm in Denver. There's what we call it the parachute drop. Drop in here with 500,000. I talk to church planners all the time. They're going, well, I'm raising my funds so I can be fully funded. Like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, I'm raising my funds. Well, are you leading people to Christ? Are you leading small? No, I'm raising my funds. I'm writing my mission statement. I'm like, what's that?
Get my logo.
Yeah, designing my logo. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Like, literally, I've had these conversations. And I'm like,
joke. It's like
these are real conversations happening, and then they blow out of here in 2 years with their tail between their legs. What did it look like, and what is it looking like for you as church planners in those early days? I know Jay didn't roll in. So I'm just kind of giving that. It goes back to some of this thing, the whole Sunday. We think we want to launch on a Sunday with 100 people. We're going to take an offering. We got a job. Versus grinding it out.
I started that way. So I started with, I got to come up with this, this 2, 5, 10-year plan. Because we were coming through this class and everything, and they were like, write your plan. There's a purpose for a plan. I kind of get it, but I'm not a huge, that's not really me. So writing out the plan, we need to get a Facebook page and a website and all that. And then things start changing, especially when you get boots on the ground. It's none of that. It is like you have to live life.
You gotta get a job.
You gotta get a job.
You gotta pay rent.
You gotta pay rent. You have to
Get
get
kids
kids in school, find doctors, dentists. Do we have insurance? No. What are we gonna do? I don't know. What's Obamacare look like today? It's just like you're trying to literally live out life. And to be honest with you, that's the when you talk about church planting as being this relational thing with the people that are in your community, you're here, so you guys live the art of neighboring. That's the first book we did in Milwaukee. Yeah, with our small group. That's the first book we did. Yeah. But yeah, so that's it. It's it's that stuff. It's not, people, and you go through all kinds of things. People, I don't even try to we don't tell people we're pastors because that's weird. Because they're like, well, where's your church?
Yeah, what are you pastoring?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, we don't really have a church. Well, where do you meet? Well, we meet in our basement.
Just right now.
Oh, so you're like a cult, right? And I'm like, no, we're not a cult. Yeah, but you meet in your basement. You serve Kool-Aid, all these strange guys. Because you're just literally trying to figure out. Your first year, you're trying to figure out life. You're trying to figure out what your community's like. We did this really cool thing that really helped me get an understanding of the makeup of our city, besides doing all your demographics and stuff, but just seeing the heart of where the people were. We stole this idea off the internet called the Conversation Couch. And we had this festival that happens in our neighborhood. It's the biggest music neighborhood festival in the city, and it had 2,000 people every Tuesday. We set up this big orange couch in the middle of it. It has a sign and a little spin wheel that has 12 different topics. And whenever people land on, we sit on the couch and we talk about. So death, sex, religion, love, sacrifice, childhood, just all these topics. And we sit down and we have a 5-minute conversation. And there's this whole crowd watching, which is really weird. Because people are all of a sudden immediately engaging in the actual conversation because people don't have a conversation anymore face to face, and they're dying for it. So they're sitting and they're pouring out their hearts, and there's this whole audience that's just staring at you. People are like, they're filming you. This is the weirdest thing they've ever seen. But for us, it was just a great way to sort of engage who is our neighbor? What do the people here think about things, and what are they going through? And for us being so new, that first year, that's really been the majority of what we're doing.
I got a job with Milwaukee Public Schools teaching 5th grade, and that was really changing for me because I had a real picture of the youth of our city. And actually, probably more has been birthed out of that than anything I've done since I've been there. And we're actually going to start a youth group, just a random youth group not connected to a church. We don't have a church, but it's interesting because Dave's current boss, who's not a Tyler Jesus, wants to help me with it. Because he just wants to do something in the community. This super diverse group of kids. I mean, every ethnicity you can imagine. And Milwaukee Public Schools, a lot of schools are incredibly diverse. We have Native American kids and Latino kids and African American kids. Lots of Hmong, in the Asian population, and then a lot of Middle Eastern kids too. And
it's also the #1 segregated city in the country.
Yeah, so it was really interesting though, my particular school, how diverse it was. And what's interesting is a lot of these kids came over to my house this summer for play dates with my kids. So, moms in full garb and then whatever, bringing their kids to my house, I'm out front in a little pool, my shorts on, but I was their kid's teacher, so they have a trust in me that they wouldn't otherwise. So I've been tutoring these kids this year that are now in 6th grade, and they're all excited because they're going to come to this bounce house place and for this youth group. And I don't know. I'm just going to base it on I'm going to be really open with the parents that We're going to be teaching, doing some lessons on character building based on the teachings of Jesus. And I think there's an opening there for these kids to come because they know me, and parents tend to have a trust of their kids' teachers and other in the schools, and so a lot of, you know, what's really just been cool is just what God's opened up for us in just these natural doing life stuff, just getting jobs and getting our kids in school and then getting involved. Dave's done a lot of volunteering at some local social agencies that do cool outreaches and food pantry stuff. And
We throw a lot of parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just living life, you know. I mean, I think when we overthink our plan, my plan makes, I look back at my plan now, and I'm like, you were an idiot. What were you thinking, you know? And then, to be honest with you, when you're in your first year and you start to hear some people's plans, I really try to refrain, but I'm like, oh, there's like no way. Like, how are they? Well, God may lead them that way, and maybe God will do that. But I'm like, you're kind of blown away by some of the things that they think are going to happen in a certain time frame and things like that.
Whenever I talk church planners, I say that some of the best advice I've heard on church planning came from the prophet Mike Tyson during an interview. You know, as he's sitting at the table, it's like this, you know, where you got Michael Spinks, Mike Tyson. You're interviewing him before this big fight. And they asked Sphinx first, you know, how are you preparing for the fight? You know, what do you think is going to happen? And he goes, you know, I can now reach Mike, so I'm going to try and make sure that, you know, I keep in a distance, you know, keep jabbing and moving around. I'm not going to let him get inside. And, you know, I think I got quicker footwork. I'm trained for endurance. Mike's not had to go more than a few rounds. You know, blah, 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 blah.
There's a reason for that.
Right. So he starts mapping out this whole plan. It's like a 3-minute, 4-minute shtick. And Mike Tyson just sitting like this. Just looking straight ahead. A couple spots down. So he said, so Mike, what do you think about what he had to say? He goes, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. That's all he says. I thought, that is church planting right there. You know, I didn't sit with these guys and like, well, we're going to gather our first 50, and then, you know, we'll meet in a pub, and then we'll multiply, and then we're going to have like these small groups, and we're going to have our leadership track.
You read my plan.
Discipleship. You know, they lay out this whole thing, and I'm like, that sounds great. And you're going to get here, and the amount of things, the amount of variables are unmanageable. So, day one, car dies. Yeah, there went that. You know, now what do I do? I don't even know. Is there a bus system in this city? Like all of a sudden, you're like, there's all this stuff. And you're like reacting to everything within 15 seconds of arrival. And so plans are helpful in that they give you a frame. Really, what they do is reflect your desires, which are worth sifting, right? Yeah. I mean, if you write things that you're desiring that are like just completely dumb, then that needs to be surfaced, so you can be coached out of that. Yeah. But the sort of perspective that your plan resembles reality in any form or fashion is like just ridiculous. So yeah. So Prophet Mike Tyson, church planting.
Everybody has a plan until they get punched.
Yeah. What do I jab it? And then the kid was out in like 38 seconds.
Yeah.
He was done. Yeah. It was
like 45 seconds. I remember that. It was like over.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Good plan.
Yeah. Did not work.
The plan lasted longer than the fight.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's absolutely true. That is so right.
It seems like, you know, because just an observation I have with church planners that are really like effective, you know, is that if we keep the focus on what we're called to do, which is make disciples, and just keep doing that, a lot of it's like when you get hit in the mouth, you know, hey, you know, I got my car broke down, but we're still going to make disciples. We're still, you know, like that's all the church planners that I know that have been really effective and have stayed the course. Like they went into it with that was their goal. their goal was to win people over, you know. And so when those obstacles come, because they come for everybody, whether you're already an existing church or not, or a church plant, you know, it's like the main of the plane, going back to what we're going to do, which is make disciples, right? You know, so that's been really helpful for us, just in a non-church plant situation for me, coming into a church that was already existing, you know, but we kind of had to replant in some ways, and you know, if we just kept focusing on making disciples, you know, just do that, you know, and we're getting a lot of traction, I think, in some of the models like the missional communities, where it's like, hey, the pressure to have a building and to launch is like, that doesn't exist. Just go make disciples, you know, and the people are doing that. So
I think it's important to reminders that like have those reminders along the way too, to sort of bump you back in that direction, because there are even within the vineyard there are sort of people who ask you certain questions that make you bump the other way, or expectations of maybe even you're sending church saying, hey, I want your metrics for this month. You know, what did you do? And you know, that kind of thing. And you're like, oh, wake up.
Got up every morning.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that.
Right. We're still alive, and we still have a roof over our
It
heads.
was less crying this week.
But like, it's important to have those relationships that bump you that way.
Yeah.
Because you forget.
Well, I think that's true, because it seems like every time you go to if you go to a pastor's conference or a leadership conference, the number one question that generally gets asked is, how big is your church?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How big is your church?
How many people are coming?
Yeah, it's like,
Gigantic.
yeah.
I used to have to fill out this form that said like how many potential members did you engage this week? And I'm like, members.
All of them.
I'm like, we don't have a member. We don't even have a membership. Like what's that? And then there was one had a question about a benevolence fund in this paper that we had to fill out once a month, and I was like,
I would like some.
I need some of the.
How do I get some? So you're right on that one.
So it's important to have those people who keep you on that main and plane, because
Church members fill out forms.
Forms generally don't work with planters. The kind of person who wants to plant doesn't generally have a good relationship with forms. That's exactly right. But there's a part of that if you ask the right kinds of questions, that you can help get people focused.
That's it.
Just keep focused.
Yeah.
Because the other, on the other side of that, it's like people can just so water down what they're doing that, hey, for instance, I'm having parties, like I'm meeting people, like I'm doing it. Well, like who's following Jesus? Do they know that what you want to do is invite them to follow Jesus? So it's like it's helpful having kind of those kinds of questions.
Very helpful.
In there too. When we went to Duluth, we actually took over an existing church that had been there like 6 years. There's about 40 people when it was pretty kind of ingrown. And so I realized if all I do is give myself to that and do Sunday in the morning, I'm just going to get more of that. It's going to stay really small. And so I just devoted like half my time to that, half my work time to that, and the other half my work time going out on the street and doing the church planting gig. And that's where my life was. But these guys were paying the bill so I could do that. And then what I did is I set up basically, I'm going to do this for 24 months. I'm going to do this for 2 years, 104 weeks. And here's some things I'm going to be aiming at along there. And at the end of that 24 months, like I'm going to evaluate, like what do we have? Can my family continue to afford to do it that way? And I had like a couple goals. Like I wanted to see us have 100 people at the end of that were actually like actively involved in community, not just coming to the service, but kind of actively involved in community. And could this thing be sustainable? Because I didn't want to put my family through, like 6 years of, no insurance and no money and all that kind of stuff. And so I set some really realistic goals there. And then I heard a talk by L.E. Mumford. John and Eleanor oversee the vineyard churches in the UK, and it was at a pastor's conference, like mid-90s, something like that, in Anaheim. And she did talk about balancing family and ministry, and the incredible privilege it is for your family to be called into ministry. And she just talked about how her and John navigated that over the years, and their kids at that point still love Jesus, and they do today. And so that was really encouraging. I went back to that talk over and over again, you know, like some of the key principles of that. And because I was working really hard, you know, like 6 days of the week, I would take Monday and relax. I would often take my kids out of school on Monday and just go do stuff. So that, like, they had privileges that other kids didn't have because I was a pastor. So, you know, they began to enjoy some of those kinds of things. So, I think keeping that healthy balance is a big deal.
Yeah.
You guys have been strangely quiet. Anything to add to all this?
We're kind of enjoying the humor.
Well, did we say something funny?
Yeah.
What else? Anything else? What are the thoughts? Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Ronnie, how does this translate to what you're up to?
You know, I was thinking about that a little bit. I'm one of those people that love church plants, but don't want it. I'm not a church planter. I recognize that. Thank God early enough. But I recognized the piece of it is I still wanted to do a form of a church, so I did a multi-site and utilize what we have in place, not reinvent the wheel, go engage the community, love a community, lead people to Christ, and let the other people work on the logistics of what we call a service. So primarily it wasn't so much a service, but it was already there, so why not use it? If that makes sense. I think the thing I probably wrestle with most is there's a model. I was curious on what the model is in your age group of church planning that we've established, our generation established as a whole, and how you see that, and what's not attractive in that model, or that you've seen so far. And that, you touched on some of it, and yet we've in regards to like funding, somebody's spending more time raising their funding, and at the same time, I want to push back and say that at the same time, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they spend all their time doing that, that's the bad thing. So there's the realities of, I've seen the church planners that we've even sent, and we've tried various things of, and I appreciate what you guys are saying about recognizing the church planner. That's probably primarily why I'm here more than anything else. And those questions you said, those 3 questions you really hit home for what they ask. But we've sent people out where they shouldn't have gone. We should have said no from the beginning. But what we've done is we've done the funding. We've done we'll fund you for 2 years. We'll fund you for 3 years. We employ you for another year and a half while you go to that community and start establishing. So what I do appreciate what has been done is we try and, how do you help the church plant succeed? And that's speaking from an existing church wanting to send planters. So we haven't got it down yet. I mean, we still have to. So I don't know what that looks like. So that's primarily why I'm sitting here. Hopefully to glean something more from maybe what you have to say as well. From my end of the sites, I think there's a number of people in my age group that are going to either retire or need to move out of the way of where they're at in their roles so you guys can function. Specifically, I was a worship pastor, need to get out of the way so the young guy that I was raising up could do his job and what he's called to do, so to speak. And that was a good move, but it wasn't until I moved out of that way that I could move into something. That form of church planning, I think, I'm curious on that if that's going to be tapped into. I think there's a lot of people that we're looking at, you either got to retire from where you're at or find something else to do, instead of saying it's such a valuable resource that I think that we have to tap into.
Yeah.
Whether it's mentoring, whether it's here's the mistakes we made, please don't do that.
Yeah.
That's great. I think we have to find a way to answer that question and the engagement in that. When I think about, let's just call it like old school church planting, like a generation ago, I always think about, I mean, we often talked, like I heard people talking about all the time, about the outside in versus the inside out approach. And so most of what I'm hearing today, I would classify as the inside out approach, that we're leading people to Jesus, we're building small groups, and we're growing from there. And when we made a decision to do that in early Vineyard church planting, it was because that person's gifts were more acclimated to doing that sort of thing. Some people, you don't see their gifts begin to shine until they have like 100, 150 people, and that's where kind of the larger launch idea came from, an outside-in approach. And then their deal was, from that point then, really begin making disciples. And they're both difficult, and they're both difficult for, you know, completely opposite reasons. But both of them are still valuable ways to think about it, depending on how you're gifted, as long as your outcome that you're looking for is that discipleship. So, when you were talking about that earlier, about, you know, showing up and raising lots of money and doing it that way, I still think there's some value to that, as long as somebody is, you know, really aimed at discipleship, really aimed at helping the crowd. You've gathered a big crowd. Now, what are you leading them into? And the bad part is if that big crowd is just simply a, you know, if there's no depth to it. So you have to begin to raise up leaders and train people and build that depth. But I still think that the outside in kind of launch thing can still actually really work in places.
Do you think, tell me if you think this is right, I don't know if I have a way to verify this, but it seems as though church life from the outside in way, that the excellence meter required is higher than ever, so to speak, in sort of the way.
Like in this culture?
Yeah.
I think so.
You know, so like when guys like Bill Hybels, Rick Warren started to do what they did, even Wimber and the Vineyard growing, it was so rare and unique and edgy and cool, and like everyone was used to being with pews and robes, and all of a sudden there's like drums and like some
Guitars,
jeans and like, whoa, just to do it made you on the edge. And Keller had said some interesting things about this recently. I heard him say, you know, just also the proliferation of the internet, that you can hear just like exceptional preaching with a click. So the sort of just appetite for experience, you know, sort of the deliverables, so to speak, of believers is so high. And when you go to do outside in, you better do it. You know, like what it would require to just be kind of cool and edgy and interesting.
If cool and edgy and interesting is your target audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what the Vineyard and even Bill Hybels, right? So he looks around and goes, no, I can't take my friends to church.
Right.
What if we were in a movie theater? And if you hear people from those worlds in early world preach, it actually wasn't that good compared to what it is now. It was just so different. Do you know what I mean? It was in a theater, there was rock music, it was like, what is this? And you could get your friends to show up, because we're doing church in a movie. That's wild. I want to come see what that's about. That's crazy. There was a minor novelty factor, and it was so approachable. Just engaged so quickly.
So
now we've changed the game. Like that now is the norm, right? Like,
so I wonder if to do. I'm just thinking out loud, but I wonder if to do the outside-in thing today, if it was more focused, less on show, like less on bigger sound systems and better lights and more smoke.
Which is what people tend to do.
Yeah. But what if it was more focused on contemplative and recovering?
Go back.
Oh, but not going back, but including some of the back, like in really relaxed. I wonder how.
There's an appetite.
Yeah, I wonder how that might work in specific contexts. You know, a spirituality rooted in
place and
Are
Main
you saying
Street.
to reach more people, like to open the door up to?
Yeah.
You're saying for a lot of people that the new would reach no longer doesn't reach anymore. Is this kind of what you're saying?
Well, it's just a concert, it's a show.
Right.
Well, what's required has to be so
Really, really good.
I mean,
But
like,
by then, it's so polished that you, like, if I put it in the context of vineyard values, by then it's no longer, doesn't fit our values anymore. Like, it's just a show.
but when you look at fast-growing churches in America, you look at those like stats, right? Whatever those mean.
Yeah. When I
The
look at
outside
this, I
in
don't trust
all.
them, I don't trust them.
Yeah, but even let's assume some of them are true. Because I mean, some are. Like, there's some of the guys I've been with, I go,
It's not that I don't trust the actual stats, it's like what they're,
What is that?
what they're bringing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they're bringing a preacher to people.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
bringing
exactly
what?
what they're doing.
Would you say?
People that are already in churches is the problem.
Yeah.
I'm curious about it. My brother goes to a mega church in South Carolina. What's his name? Perry Noble. Have you guys heard of him?
Oh, yeah, that's like just on, I mean, it's.
Oh yeah,
nuts.
his wife's on staff there. I've been to it. It is a show like you would
30,000
not
people.
believe. I mean, laser lights.
No, for real, like actual lasers.
It's
Actual
Yeah,
lasers,
right.
an intense rock
Yeah,
concert.
fog and the whole
The
deal.
kids programming
They're fog bombs.
is just as big, you know, like for 4
That's what you need, 5 bombs.
But my brother's always, every time we get together, 3,000 people baptized at Easter
Yes.
morning.
Is this viral right now? Could be watching.
5,000 people saved this week. He's always saying these numbers. And I'm just kind of at that same place, like,
South Carolina, yeah.
what's happening there? What really is happening?
Yeah.
And so that's why when you were saying this, I'm kind of curious. No, what your perspective is on this, because I've thought about this myself, like, is your concern that we're lacking depth and real discipleship? Or
It's contextual.
that this has become so the norm that we're really not drawing people outside of the church?
I have an analogy, you want it?
Yes.
Here's my analogy. I want you to imagine you show up at the Cause Conference, which you're going to, and there's 2 workshops. One is taught by the Apostle Peter. The workshop is titled, How to Grow Your Church from 12 to 3,000 in One Sermon. The other workshop is taught by the Apostle Paul, and it's called, How to Preach to Pagans and Have a Few Follow You. Which workshop are you going to attend? Now, what's interesting is that is the difference between their ministries.
Yeah.
The difference is Peter's message, which I assume you gathered the allusions after Acts 2, it's the sermon in Acts 2, what
Right.
happens in Acts 3, is to predispose people. There's a story that they know, there's an experience they're expecting, the story clicks into place, a prophecy from Joel is declared at the feasts, right? I mean, the whole thing lines up and click, click, bam, 3,000 people come to Christ. Predisposed people discovering the life of Jesus. Now, does anyone here want to say, that's kind of a dumb thing? Like, no, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Totally counts.
That's like real. That's an actual thing. Like, I want those people to know Jesus. That's important. But that's a very specific thing.
Right.
Paul, meanwhile, preaching in Athens, I love the way the text ends because it lists the people that follow him. It says Dionysus and this person, this person. It lists like 4 people.
Yeah.
And it says, and they became followers of Paul. Now, it's an interesting thing to note because it means, like, imagine the Christianity Today person's there to do the interview afterward. It says to Dionysus, tell me about what happened today. I decided I'm following Paul. They'd be like, that's a heresy. You know, like, Paul's a heretic. This is illegal.
Yeah.
And it's not illegal because most people follow us before they follow Jesus.
Right.
That's what really happens. That's the way it really works.
Right.
When people have no predisposition, they're trying to get their head around the story. They don't have a story that joins with our story. So the only way they can do it is to join their story to yours. That's the only thing that's tangible. It's in front of them. So that's what they do. And it's hard, it's slogging. It's a different thing. And I doubt, and you can see, I mean, if you have eyes to see it, it depends on how you interpret the text, but you can see the tension running its way all the way through the New Testament between the work of Paul and the work of Peter and the brothers in Jerusalem. You just watch it play out page after page after page, letter after letter, narrative after narrative. They are going what is legitimate ministry, what is real, until they really have to have like a big fight about it, you know? The Council of Jerusalem is a fight. I mean, I doubt that was like an entirely pleasant experience. I mean, it's a real thing. And they're both presenting evidence of what's happening. And in the end, they find a way to say this is all valid, and yet we will not make it difficult for the Gentiles to come in. We're not going to do that other thing, right? So they find a way forward together. So when I look at Perry Noble, Andy Stanley, bless Andy's heart, I think he's incredible. And Andy even says, don't ask me about church planting because I don't know anything about it. I didn't plant a church. We moved 1,000 people. So like, you tell me I planted a church, I didn't plant a church. I like hived off a church out of crisis, pretty much. So, is that real ministry? Yes. Does anyone want Perry Noble to stop doing what he's doing? I don't. I'd love for him to keep doing that. But if we look at the trends of what's happening in American culture at large, from the large cities on the coast all the way in, I don't think that's what it's going to look like moving forward. I don't think that's the way moving forward for cities like New York, LA, Chicago, and then the ripple effect through, frankly, the secularization of small town America is a fascinating, it's a fascinating phenomenon. It is happening. It isn't like just Manhattan. Manhattan is in rural New York. Chicago is in rural Illinois. Do you know what I mean? Those mindsets and frameworks.
Well, we just got dial-up internet recently in rural America, so we're...
That's not what I mean. What I'm trying to say is, all these things are really happening across all of America.
That's true,
So the focus is always, Manhattan or Chicago. No, that's
it's everywhere.
it's Grand Junction. It's anywhere where there's some kind of university, even mainstream. This is mainstream. So what I don't want to speak too poorly of my brother's Perry Noble. I want him to do exactly what he's doing. But if we're imagining that's the future, I think we might have a problem with that. I think that might be, that causes me pause because our city of Denver, we've had one church one time with over 10,000 people. And a city of 3 million people, we have to figure something else out. Church plants are dying left and right. And so there's another thing afoot that we have to discern. But this is where we learn from the Brits. This is where we learn from across the pond.
Yeah.
If any of the prognosticators are right, and let's all hope they're not, let's all believe that God will raise up a Jonathan Edwards and a Finney. Let's believe that in our day we'll see another great awakening. I have faith for that. A Wesley.
So Jay,
But barring that, we're going to need to figure out how to do it this other way.
do you think a model then? Model, the word model itself, just having that word.
Frameworks, paradigms, I like words.
It almost becomes a catch-22.
Well, models should flow out of paradigms and calling and mission and people and, so even like guys like Wesley, poor Wesley, he just kept like shouting till his dying day, like, we're just trying to keep up with what we think the Holy Spirit's given favor to do, right? Like even the method of the Methodists was not intended to become this codified instrument, right? And so anyway, every generation has got to battle with what is the Holy Spirit doing. But in light of the secularization, the change, the way the church in America is working, there's a lot of new things that are going to shift. The world's shifting faster than ever. So I feel no need to indict those guys, but I also think it's interesting that isn't occurring in New York.
That is not.
No.
Yeah, right.
Or London.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Right.
And I think those guys would be the first to admit we are called to the context that we're called to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bible Belt is just really unique.
It needs movement from God.
It is.
It is. It's like,
yes, it is.
yeah.
I know Jesus.
You guys probably are noticing that too in Milwaukee. You had mentioned Catholic Lutheran.
Yeah.
When I got down 7 or 8, I was ready to do postmodern,
secular ministry. And then I moved to rural Wisconsin. And so I was trying to deconstruct everything and become unreligious.
Yeah.
And I found that pushing people away.
Yeah.
So like in our community, the bigger the steeple, the more people would probably come.
Right.
You know, so it's a really unique, but at the same time too, I think Jay's totally correct. I mean, the younger generation they don't have that continuity or that connection with the church,
right,
like grandma and grandpa or mom and dad, right?
Right.
So I mean, there's definitely some unique, factors involved in outside of the Bible Belt, I guess, too, so it's really we're just in such a weird culture right now, where I feel like in our culture, there's like 7 or 8 different sociological,
That's right.
and so I'm sure it's only even worse, or more so in the larger city, but you guys are figuring that too, right? It's
yeah.
especially in a multi-ethnic
Oh, yeah.
community where you're like seeing all these different strands and you're trying to tie them together, and it's crazy. That's why we need, outpouring of the Holy Spirit to
Oh,
really
yeah.
give us wisdom. And,
Absolutely.
In our day, the new methods, we need leaders and like frameworks that build models that people are just empowered by the presence of God.
Yeah.
Who knows what that would look like? Or whatever it is, it'll look different. And I have faith, again, like a movement like the Vineyard, we're wired to move with the Holy Spirit. Like, that's how we're wired. We don't have like a lot of money tied up in stuff that we can't try things.
You don't need a lot of permissions.
Yeah. We're structured to move.
Yeah.
That was one of the things early on in Duluth I figured out. I don't actually need to wait for everybody's permission. I can just try stuff, and I won't get in trouble. And if I do, then I'll back off a little bit. And I start trying everything I could, and it's driving a blast.
Yeah.
And so
if you get in trouble, it probably means you did something.
Yeah.
Because it means you got somebody's attention. That's not all bad either, right?
Exactly. Come to think of it, that didn't happen.
Did it? Oh, can we hear that story?
No.
I haven't gotten in trouble yet. I'm not trying hard enough.
Well, you got in trouble.
Oh, have I? You just haven't even recognized. I just didn't even notice.
They've talked to me about it.
They.
We went back to say.
There's a reason why I like coming to Colorado so much lately.
Yeah, every 2 weeks it's reporting. Well, let's take a little time and just pray for one another, pray for kind of this stuff. Just ask God to continue to lead us. I love that Peter Paul thing. I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. That's really good. And there's times where God calls us to be Peter. There's times where He calls us to be Paul, Timothy and Titus, and Barnabas. And, just in our specific context and our culture, just listening to what He says and doing.
Yeah.
So I'll start off, and you guys just feel free to pray out. Father, thank you so much for just this time and the thoughts, the ideas, the hopes, the dreams, the fears that we shared. And Holy Spirit, we just ask that you would continue to speak to us. Give us your heart. Give us your compassion. Give us your wisdom. And I just thank you for each of the men and women here who's in this room. And Lord, would you just speak clearly? Would you envision and excite? Just come, Holy Spirit.
Father, we invite your presence. We thank you so much that you have given us this responsibility, that we just want to do the best we can with what we have, and all we want to do is just do what we're called to do. Father, we all bless in your name Michael and Jay for just everything that they're doing, everything that they're giving away to other people. We thank you so much that so many lives are coming to you and are going to continue to come to you. And we just bless that Michael and Jay also just keep learning, that they never just become stagnant, because all they want to do is just reach after you, Father. We bless everyone that's probably looking, watching this online, and everybody in this room. We see what we're doing in you, and not anything else.
Yes. Yes. We can look back, even just in recent history, and see how you moved mightily across nations and cities. You made things new again, how you raised up leaders, and how you tilled the ground to prepare places for people to sow the gospel of your kingdom. And we see places in the world where that's happening now. We think about our brothers and sisters in China who are just pouring into the kingdom, and despite great opposition. And see nations, cities like Lagos, Nigeria, how you just turned a whole city over in a couple of generations. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people pouring into life with you. And nations like Iran, where many young people and universities are finding new life in you. In Brazil, churches of hundreds of thousands of people building and making disciples. And Lord, we can look back in our own history. We can see remnants of all these little Methodist churches dotted across rural America. Churches centered right in the middle of our main cities. Just building points for what you wanted to do. And so we know, God, that you have moved before, and so we do ask that you would do it again. And we say, Lord, that we're in for whatever you want to do. And if you're drying out the tinder for the fire that you will bring, then we say yes to that. We'll participate. If you are obscuring us for a moment, we're just hidden as the vineyard, and you'll draw us into the story at the right place, we say yes to that. But we say that if it was up to us, we want to see a great move in our time, in this generation. Thousands of people that surround us. Give us eyes to see them, and ears to hear. Give us hearts to be faithful to the moments in front of us. And pray for each person here. I'm sure there's one or two things we're supposed to hear today that you would ask us to take seriously in our life. Maybe for a few, kind of a defining moment. That decades from now, we'll talk about a moment in this room. And so I pray that we would have eyes to see that. You would center these things in our hearts. Teach us how to do the first things first, like Michael spoke about, remind us. We trust you will lead us, and we confess we don't always have eyes to see. So speak and lead. Show us what we might follow and obey.
Amen. Hey, thanks you guys for coming. And hope you're planning to hang out at the Rest of the Cause conference. If you're hanging out, man, please feel free to engage in lots of ministry, praying for folks. Just kind of, those of you that are, if you're in leadership or you've got experience with this, please feel free to just give lots of prophetic words to folks. We just free everybody up to go do that. Go pray for folks. Go invite them into what God's doing in their lives. Don't project stuff on them, but really invite them. You're welcome to do that. That's awesome. And then I've got these little launching leaders booklets. Caitlin brought in a pile of these. And it's just basically it's a recap of old Vineyard stuff that I've been taught over the years about identify, recruit, train, deploy, monitor new leaders. And so there's a package over here opened up. If you haven't seen that yet and you want to grab one or two, feel free to do that. Other than that, cool. Thanks for watching.